Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 461 of the No Sugarcoating Podcast. How are you? How's your day going? How's your week going? Goodness, how are we already? Almost the end of January. 2024 is well underway. It has been a really interesting month. I'm really excited to dive into today's episode. I have to tell you something. Um, you know, I've had my business for 10 and a half years now. I'm so grateful and so blessed that I get to record this podcast every week and create content and get creative and share my stories and experiences and help so many amazing women all over the world claim their food and body freedom. And something that I realized like last week is, oh my goodness, I haven't shared my story in such a long time on the podcast. And to be honest with you, sometimes, like after you've healed something, which I dealt with binge eating 15 years ago now already, which is hard to believe, it feels like a different lifetime, to be honest with you. And so sometimes, like when I'm thinking about content and things to create, like you sometimes innocently forget about where you were 15 years ago and the mentality you were in and the habits you were in and the behaviors that you were in. And what I realized is, wow, like it's so important that I go back to the very beginning and that I really bring forth a lot of this behavior, thoughts, beliefs, experiences. I feel like I talk about it in the podcast a lot, but with my YouTube and Instagram content, I was like, oh, yeah, like this is really important. And I love hearing from you guys. So if there's something you're struggling with or something you want to see a future podcast episode on or a program, please don't ever hesitate to email me info@amberproof.ca. Let me know what you need help with, what you have questions about, or what you want to see topics for, because this is all for you. I'm creating all this for you. This business, everything here is for you. And of course, me getting to feel so fulfilled and honored that I get to be of service and assist those of you that listen, that reach out for support, whatever it is on your journey to food and body freedom. So I wanted to just share that today because sometimes I'm like, what do I usually know what to talk about podcasts. Podcast is easy, but sometimes when I'm writing a newsletter or I'm creating Instagram content, I'm like, okay, what should I talk about today? What should I do today? And I have like certain ideas and I'm like, oh, I should get my spicy side out and I should talk more about this or more of this. And then I'm like, yeah. And it's also important that I go back to the very beginning and have this blend. So today on the podcast, I'm going to be sharing my story of struggling with overcoming binge eating and dealing with binge eating, the low points of binge purge cycle and eating out of the garbage can and taking the first steps to healing. It's, a very vulnerable journey, but I'm happy to share about it because I know it helps so many of you. And even if you've already heard this story, listen again because you're going to take different things away. Each time I tell it a little bit differently because I add in more details because I have healed and can look back and understand why certain things happened the way that they did. So I'm really excited to share this with you today. And today, as we go through the episode, I'll touch on things like one-on-one coaching, the group program, Jump Into Your Body Freedom, and the Gut Health Masterclass coming in February. One-on-one is available now, and the group program starts in February too. I don't want to be too long-winded in my intros, and at the same time, I do want to let you guys know what is coming up and what is going on so that if you know you're ready to take the next step in your life-changing journey to food and body freedom and overcome that binge eating, the food addiction, the emotional eating, the binging and purging, build body love, get to the roots of your hormone and gut issues and beyond. There's always things available for you and the door is open. So welcome and come if you feel called. So let's dive right in. The show notes for today's episode can be found at amberproof.ca/podcast/461. Okay. So we're going to go back to the very beginning. And this journey started for me when I was 5, truly. It's the first life-changing moment that happened for me. So we had just moved out to an acreage. It was my first day to take the bus. So my mom took me out, of course, and walked me across to the bus. And I was so excited. Just envision little big brown-eyed mushroom cut Amber, just so pumped. I remember I was wearing this like little white sweater with pink polka dots and pink sleeves and little ruffles. And I was just so excited to get on the bus, to make new friends, this new experience. And I was a kind, loving little girl. So here we go. I go on the bus and did not have that experience at all. When I got on the bus, the first thing I heard was, look at her, she's ugly, she's fat. And then the entire bus started making fun of me. So there was these few boys who said that. And the whole bus just starts laughing and making fun of me. And it was such a horrifying, hurtful, shocking moment. I felt so embarrassed and I felt so much shame. And I thought, well, if strangers are saying it, it must be true. And so I took on the identity of fat and ugly for the next 20 years of my life. And so can any of you resonate to having an experience as a child or any time through your life? It could have been last week where you were bullied, where someone said something to you or called you a name, or you were embarrassed or brought into a space of hurt or shame or embarrassment that feels like it's significantly altered your confidence, your life, the way you see yourself, the way you go out into the world. Because when we get, bullied or called names, or our confidence gets shattered like that, and you don't know how to deal with it or work through it or just brush it off, we tend to take these identities on, we believe them, and then we step into more insecurity, more body shame, and so on and so forth. And so that was the first defining moment. And growing up, with my mom, who, rest her soul, is an angel now. She passed away just over 2 years ago. She had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis before I was born. And I can't imagine the emotional experience of being diagnosed with something like that, literally being told, that this is what's going on, and to know that you're going to lose a lot of mobility and function of your body slowly over time. What a just absolutely like shocking experience. And I I really still believe every soul picks their life and picks the experience they want to have. And I'm just like, Mom, why would you pick that kind of an experience to have? But every soul chooses. Anyways, this episode is for her. Love you, Mom. I miss you. I know you're an angel now, and she's not suffering anymore because it was bad the last 10 years. So growing up, my mom was so full of love. She was such a great mother. She always made sure that I was taken care of, and so did my dad. Great parents. Um, but some things, that also shaped this journey with food and body were things like I could eat whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. There was always loads of junk food, sweets, pastries, boxes of cookies in the fridge. The fridge was always too full of stuff, everything, right? Processed food. We had fast food whenever we wanted. There was never any like balance with food. It was just I could eat whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. And part of that was as I healed my relationship with food and would go home and visit, I started to realize that my mom was in a lot of the same behaviors as me, and that she had a food addiction that she did not deal with. But that was one of her ways of coping, I think, with her diagnosis after it happened, that she never really wanted to look at or deal with. And she had a really big problem with spending money and hoarding and all that too. But this is what we do to numb our pain. Right. So for any of you that are dealing with this, I'm just sending you a lot of love because it's deep and it's a lot. And for any of you that grew up with a parent or a loved one who, got diagnosed with a serious illness and suffered and struggled a lot, when you're a child, it is confusing because you don't exactly know what's going on. It is so hard and hurtful to watch your parent that you love and look up to so much struggle and suffer, and have days, where mom would be like, well, I'd love to do this with you today, but my foot's numb and I can't get around very good. Right. And to see her in tears or afraid of like what the future was going to be for her, or to hear her talk about how much she hated her body because she was very overweight and just very, felt very insecure about her body. And when you're a child and you're witnessing your mother in this state, it just made me very sad. And it made me feel I just felt so helpless. Like there was nothing I could do. And so food really became a friend because it's like, well, food makes me feel good. It's always there. It doesn't call me names. And a lot of the activities that my mom and I did together, we would include food. And I think it was a way that she would try to compensate because she felt guilty about us not being able to do certain things together. And she never, ever had to feel guilty because she was doing the best that she could. um, but that was a very emotional circumstance growing up, witnessing her decline and feeling helpless, you know, um, when I healed and learned so much, she didn't want my help. And I had to let go of that, and that it was my responsibility to fix her. She didn't want help. I loved her dearly. But, we have to let go sometimes and just like love the person and let them be on the path that they're on. But it's hard at the same time because you think, well, man, there could be things we could do to improve her quality of life or improve this and that, right? So growing up, it was a very hard experience to witness her, struggling and suffering and all of those things. And my heart just goes out to any of you that are going through that with your own family members, loved ones, or you yourself. Because I don't take it lightly. So coming into my tweens, you start to discover much back in the day when there was much music and MTV played music videos, and you start buying CDs. Yes, growing up in the 90s, compact discs. And like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera were some of my first CD purchases, and they all have flat stomachs, and they all are so tiny and look perfect and have the perfect body, and they're rich and famous and getting all the attention. And you start comparing your body going, why don't I look like that? Why does my stomach stick out? Why? And instead of going, well, because a lot of that's photoshopped and edited or whatever, we start to go, well, what's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me because I don't look like that. And I think we get so conditioned to be hard on ourselves. And that's where a lot of that body image and criticism comes in, the comparison, how we're treated by our friends, how like I remember parents' friends like pointing out my weight and stuff and be like, oh, she's way bigger than her friend and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, people, can we stop making comments about kids' bodies and their weight? Like it's not helpful at all, ever. And I remember watching movies, and the girl, like if she got broken up with or something sad happened, she was sitting on her bed emotionally eating. She was eating the box of chocolates. She was eating the pint of ice cream. And so it's like all these like messages are getting literally innocently, well, it's not innocent, it's on purpose, but they're getting programmed into your mind. And it seems so innocent when you're watching it at the time. But at some point, I've got to make a reel where it shows like all the different movies where they're literally showing emotional eating. I need to write that down. Because it's like mind blowing when you start to see how the movies are created to like subconsciously program you into these kinds of behaviors. It's one of the things that contributes. So I hated my body. I hated myself. I felt insecure. I thought the answer was being thin, having a flat stomach to get attention, to get love, all that kind of stuff. So fast forward, right? I think I was an unconscious emotional eater for most of my life, leading into my early 20s. And then the next life-changing experience happened. I moved away from home. I went to state for broadcast news. I wanted to be like an entertainment reporter. Thank God that never worked out. And that the path unfolded this way, which is just so amazing. But I got into my first serious relationship. After 2 years, it ended. I got broken up with, and I was just absolutely so hurt and so heartbroken that I could barely eat. And I started losing weight fast. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, I'm going to like keep calorie restricting. I got into the gym 2 hours a day, which I don't recommend doing either of these things. And if you are, please get support to overcome them. It's very unhealthy for your hormones, your mental health, everything, to try and force yourself or stay in these kinds of habits and behaviors. And I was like, if I can just get the perfect body, then maybe he'll come back, or maybe everything will finally be perfect and I'll finally be happy and I can live my life the way I wanted to. And so I reached my quote unquote goal weight, which was a lot thinner than what is healthy for me. And nothing got better. I wasn't happier. In fact, I became more critical of my body, became more arrogant. My period completely disappeared, which is not a good sign. It means you've lost too much weight, right? Now I'm obsessed about what I'm eating. I'm obsessed about my restriction. I'm obsessed about needing to go to the gym for 2 hours a day. And if I missed a day, I was so critical, so hard on myself. I'd feel guilty, which is not healthy. You need rest days, but that was the like exercise addiction, and then when nothing changed and I didn't feel better and I wasn't happy, and, the guy didn't want me back, it was like, well, F it. What's the point? What is the point? I can't keep this up. It's way too hard. And so I went to a barbecue and had my first memorable binge. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take a salad because I'll eat the salad, but I'm not going to eat anything else that was there. So it was very restrictive, had a lot of rules to try and attain this low weight, right? It was very restrictive. And I brought an ice cream cake. They're like, Amber, can you go to DQ and pick up an ice cream cake and bring it? I was like, yeah, no problem. Like, I'm not going to have any. So go to the party, I have my salad, and then they're like, do you want some cake? And I was like, inside of course it was my ego. I just didn't know yet at the point. It's like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. And then I'm like, oh, but I'll just have one piece. It won't hurt. So I had a piece and had a massive like dopamine high moment. I was like, oh, that was so good. And then my ego kicked in and was like, you messed up, like blah, blah, blah. Like, it's ruined. You ruined your day. You ruined your diet. Who cares now? Just eat whatever you want. And that kicked in that first memorable experience of the all or nothing mentality of either I have to be perfect, all in, otherwise, who cares? F it, like fully losing control. And so I'm like, well, might as well have another piece of cake. And then I had a burger with a bun, God forbid. And then I took this full chocolate bar that was sitting on the counter that was for s'mores, grabbed it, went into the bathroom, ate the whole thing. Yeah, so I stole the chocolate bar and everyone's like looking for it. I'm like, oh my God, I totally just took that and ate it. And then on the way home, which I left early because I was like, oh, I'm gonna go get fast food and stuff and on the way home and go binge so no one can see what I was doing. And I didn't know it was binge eating yet at the time. Um, and then I went through the fast food drive-through, got like chicken strips, French fries, and another whole ice cream cake, went home and binged until I was so full I was sick. And it was a horrible feeling afterward. I was so bloated, so puffy, slept like crap, had heartburn, woke up the next day, felt so swollen, looked so swollen, and was like panicked and like, now I have to skip breakfast. I've got to go to the gym for 3 hours. I can't eat anything but salads today. And like I just talked about, thus started the all or nothing mentality of restriction, over exercising even more. And then obviously my blood sugar would drop significantly from not eating enough through the first half of the day. And then I would feel so hungry and my cravings for refined sugar and carbs and baked goods and stuff were so strong that it was just so easy to then lose control by the end of the day and go to the store and buy all the stuff that I, was trying to restrict. And of course, I didn't keep any of those things in the house at the time because I knew if I had them, they would tempt me, which is just another sign of emotional eating, food addiction, binge eating. When we heal our relationship with food, we ideally should be able to have anything in the house and it not trigger us at all or be an issue. It's like it doesn't even phase you. And if you can't have certain things in the house, that's okay. No shame in your game. There's a long period of time where I couldn't either. But then I encourage you to like reach out for support and work on that because we haven't fully healed our relationship with food if we have to avoid certain things for fear of losing control. So that started the cycle of the binging and the restriction very deeply. And so I found that I would start binge eating and lose control for a few days, gain 5, 6, 10 pounds, right? And then, I had gone through the summer and I'd probably gained about 20 and gained another 20 into the fall. I gained about 60 pounds by that November. So it was very fast weight gain. Now I'm the heaviest I've ever been. Probably gained another 10 by the end of the year. So I was definitely at my peak with that 70 pounds of weight gain. Now I'm just feeling so embarrassed, so shamed of my body. Now I'm hiding from friends. I don't want to go out in public. I'm definitely not allowing myself to date because I don't feel good enough. I don't look good enough. Who would want to be with me? And it's the sad thing though, is like how different I was treated when I had lost the weight versus gained a bunch. I remember going to the gym when I had lost the weight and like every guy would open the door for me and like want to talk and all this stuff, right? And then when I had gained all the weight, none of them would open the door. People looked at you so differently. No one wanted to talk. And I guess I just bring this up because when you've gained a lot of weight, like I'm just so sorry if you've ever been treated poorly because of your size or your body, whether you're small and petite or you've put on protection. No one should be treated differently because of the way that they look or the shape or size of their body. And I think it's so sad that society has been so conditioned, again, largely thanks in part to movies and Hollywood and music videos. Look at how they bully certain shapes and sizes in movies and they segregate and divide. I remember the movie Mean Girls and they're like, and the nerds sit over here and the preps sit over here and this group of kind of people. And it's like, why are you like literally planting seeds of division? Like we're all one, like there's way too much divide in this world. And part of what created that is Hollywood and all of their stuff. It seems so innocent, but it's not, if you really look at it with open eyes. Anyways, so I'm just so sorry if you've ever gone through that, because it's such a crappy feeling when you're like, wow, I was treated so differently a few months ago than I'm being treated now. No one should be treated differently because of the way that they look. You are just as incredible of a person, regardless of where you are. And the other thing that it really taught me through the whole experience is like, never judge anybody, because you never know what someone is going through behind the scenes that has caused you to put on protection or lose weight or whatever it is. Like, I just remember, really going through that experience, and it really helped me have more empathy and compassion rather than be judgmental and be like, yeah, people gain weight because they're sitting on the couch eating chips and they have no willpower. And it's like, no, that has absolutely nothing to do with it. And going through that experience like really opened me up to the depth of food addiction and binge eating and all of that. And that there's so many layers to why the body hangs on to protection. Well, like I always talk about, it's because your body doesn't feel safe. So that really put me into a dark place of just like isolation, quitting all my hobbies, just working a crappy retail job at the time, and just feeling like so ashamed. And I was really unhappy and grumpy and short with people. And, I just was obsessing about what can I do to try and lose the weight again. But no matter what I did, nothing was working. And the binge eating just took over. I'd spend most nights of the week putting a movie on, going to the store, trying to justify why going to the organic store made any sense, that it was healthier, even though I literally would go and I would buy like a thing of pasta, a sandwich, a whole chocolate bar, a pint of ice cream, a fudge oat bar, a raspberry oat muffin. I'm just literally remembering all the things I used to get, like a box of crackers and cheese, a bag of chips, usually a couple other kinds of cookies. And I would like eat those on the way home first before I got home. But there was always sweet and savory stuff, those yogurt covered pretzels and yogurt covered raisins and all kinds of different things. One time I even went to Costco because I was picking up groceries, and I bought a Costco sized pumpkin pie, which is like feeds like probably 30 or 40 people. And then I binged on it in the parking lot and ate like half of it, felt like absolute garbage. And then I'm like, oh my God, I just spent a lot of money on that too. It was expensive. I was spending $50 to $80 on binge food each time I was going to the organic store. So that's where I'm not kidding, where in my bio it says that I spent over $50,000 on binge foods and quick fixes, because that adds up really fast. And I was working crappy retail. I didn't have money. My bank account was always in the red. I didn't want to look at my bank account. I didn't want to face my finances. I didn't want to face anything at all. Myself, my issues, the struggles I was going through. I didn't know how to cope with stress in a healthy way. I didn't know, nor did I want to feel my feelings, like nothing. I was just completely in this checkout mode, and all that became important to me was getting my fix and getting my binge in, and obsessing about the next binge I was going to have, and then trying to obsess and figure out what the next diet or the next restriction was going to look like, sometimes to try and motivate myself to lose weight. And like, no shame in the game. If you're doing any of this, do not be ashamed. The whole point is to just share with you you're not alone. But I would create these like weight loss progress trackers, and I would like draw like one of those big like thermometers, and I'd be like, okay, once you hit this weight, then you can go and do this, and once you lose this amount of weight, then you can go on this little trip, and then you can buy clothes, and then you can do this and blah blah blah, thinking it would motivate me, or buying smaller clothes thinking it would motivate me. No, none of that worked, because none of that will work. This is such a deep mindset, emotional, psychological, physical, energetic, behavioral game, that those kinds of things, you think it's going to work, but it doesn't. And then it just disappoints you more when a year later the clothes still don't fit and you still haven't met your goals. So you're not allowing yourself to live your life fully. So here's a question for you, all of you. How many of you hold back living your life in different ways because you're not happy with your body? Because binge eating, emotional eating is making you really be critical of yourself. It's making you hate yourself. You feel disgusting. You feel like a disgrace. You feel so much shame and embarrassment. So you're like, well, I could never give myself permission to go and start a business or grow a business or put myself out there or charge more or ask for a promotion or date or be intimate or whatever, because like I don't feel good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm in this behavior. Therefore, I don't feel worthy of having an amazing life. And until I lose the weight and overcome this behavior or whatever the story is, I'm going to stay here. But how many of you hold back or have held back living your life because of your weight, the way you look, or you're not feeling good enough, or because you're struggling with this binge behavior? I literally, unless I was below like 140 pounds, I would not allow myself to go out and go in public, to socialize, see friends, date. I just wouldn't. I was like, no, you're up. You're not allowed. Like that was literally the like prison that I put myself in, that my ego put me in, because I had so deeply tied my worth up to the number on the scale and my happiness. If I'd get on the scale and it didn't go down or it stayed the same after like dieting and exercising for even just a week or a few days, I'd be so frustrated and so pissed off. And that became a binge trigger, right? Because it's like, well, screw it. I did all of that for freaking nothing. Might as well go binge, right? And so through the first, it's important for me to talk about this because I don't really a lot. And if you're going through this, I'm just sending you so much love. Try not to feel shame. You're not alone and you can overcome it. Through, I would say, the first 6 months of like when I was still had just lost the weight but started binge eating, I did go through a period of about 6 months of binging and then purging right after, because I thought that if I purged, I wouldn't gain weight, that it was a way to try and have control with my weight and my body. And so after most binges, I was purging, and it's a horrible feeling. You don't want to do it, but when one of your biggest fears is gaining weight after you lose it, you will go to whatever lengths you can to try and prevent it from happening, because you've tied your worth up so much with your weight that you feel you have to fix it and like do something to course correct. I even went through a period of time while I was binging and purging where I'd like put the food in my mouth and chew it and then like spit it out in a bag, thinking that like that would change something, right? Um and so the irony of it though is I gained all the weight, and I think purging amplified how fast I gained the weight because it's such a destructive, violent act. It's such a hateful act to binge. And then on top of that, purge. Binge eating and binging and purging are acts of hate and self-loathing. And I think it's important to be honest about that. I always come from love, but in order to like shed the light on how significant and serious of a behavior this is, and that it's so important that we stop tolerating it and or stop thinking that, well, it doesn't matter if I binge, I'll just go get rid of it afterward, because it's a full lack of ownership and responsibility, thinking that doing that to our body is going to prevent us from gaining weight. It's going to cause weight gain to happen more easily because we're in such a violent act. It's so hard on your heart health. I was worried if I kept doing it, I was going to have a heart attack or something was going to happen to my heart health, or I was going to have a stroke. The acid on my teeth and heartburn and damage to my tissues in my esophagus. So it was very concerning. And it's like, I didn't want to do it. But what ends up happening is when you start binge eating, right, you have a pathway that lights up that's like, oh, it's time for you to do this. And then if you purge, and you get into that behavior, it's like I binge, and then the pathway lights up in your brain that's like, oh, now you go get rid of it, you go purge. And so it can feel really hard to binge and then not purge, but it is possible to overcome it. And this is where, if you are dealing with this, I highly encourage you to get support. I've had quite a few women come to work with me who have done both and have fully overcome both. And so we just have a lot of compassion and empathy. It's a safe space to go at a pace that feels good for you always. And I have to also be lovingly honest that it is a very destructive behavior, and we want to take ownership and responsibility and work through what's going on. And so, you know, that I think for me is part of what amplified that 70 pounds of weight gain, because it was just stressing my body out even more to purge after the binge. And so finally, I was able to stop purging. I told myself, like, if you binge, you've got to own this. You've got to deal with it. You've got to deal with the bloating and the discomfort and all of it, because you need to figure out why you're doing this, and just getting rid of it and avoiding dealing with it is no longer an answer. So I stopped purging and kept binging, but then it was like, wow, there's so much suffering. I'm so uncomfortable, but I've got to own that I just did this. It's just I wasn't yet figuring out exactly what I was doing or why. And, then it comes to, that was such a low point, going through the binging and purging and gaining all the weight anyway, losing control with my weight. Um, and then people always say, like, what made the change? Like, obviously, we're struggling with this for a while. And I said, yeah, it was about a year and a half or 2 years of just like constant binge eating and just this frustration. And it was like going to my days off, going to the store and buying a dozen cupcakes and eating through half of them and having a stomach ache, and then going and getting fast food and just full blown binge days. And when I'd go to the store, if I was just there the night before, I'd try to pick a different checkout person so that they didn't recognize me and that I was there buying the exact same things. Um, so yeah, like if you're going through any of this, my heart goes out to you. You're not alone. This doesn't have to be your big secret. Even if your first step is to just email me and tell me what you're going through, to know you're not alone and to get that weight lifted off your shoulders, you're so welcome to do so. The inbox is always open, or the Instagram DMs. It's important that you know you're not alone and that you don't have to keep dealing with this. Okay. So, people always say to me, like, well, what was the change? And I think what happens sometimes with these behaviors is when you're so obsessed with food and your body and the numbers and chasing diets, chasing the scale, obsessing about your next binge, obsessing about the next restriction, wishing you were the weight you were a few years ago. And that, again, your ego tries to convince you your life would be great, even though when I went through that, nothing got better. Um, but I got into this comfort zone of familiarity, and essentially I'd convinced myself, or my ego had convinced me, that there was no point in trying to change it because I had no idea what to do, that I had dug myself into such a deep hole of like, well, like you're going to have to try and figure out how to lose 70 pounds. That's a huge hole to try and dig my way out of. I've got all these digestive issues that I don't know what to do with. My cravings are insane. I'm exhausted. I'm in pain. I'm inflamed. I'm puffy. I'm not sleeping well. I don't have, a lot of financial means to go get help. And I don't want to tell anyone what I'm struggling with because I'm too ashamed and embarrassed for anyone to know. Um, who would I be if I didn't use food as a crutch, as a friend? That's scary to think about, not having food as a soother anymore, as my safety blanket. What if I try to figure this out and I fail and it doesn't work? What if I'm stuck like this for the rest of my life? What if it eventually actually ends up being the thing that is my demise and kills me and I don't make it to 30, right? So there's all these fears that I had. And I know many of you have had or have some of these or all of these, because when I have a consultation with you and I ask, what do you think is holding you back? You say fear of failure. What if it doesn't work? Fear of investing, fear of not having food as a crutch, whatever it is, fear of losing control with my weight if I'm not restricting or whatever. And fear keeps us stuck. Fear stands for false evidence appearing real. Unless there is a cougar or a bear standing in front of you, or a vehicle like driving into your lane, fear is false evidence appearing real. We create all these stories in our minds that make us afraid, even though there's nothing to truly fear. And then we let fear freeze us and keep us stuck. And then we stay in the same behaviors. We keep tolerating what is actually a comfort zone of suffering. And nothing really changes, except we suffer more, our health declines more, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Our frequency drops more. We attract more misaligned opportunities, circumstances, lack, right? Like I was getting parking tickets and attracting unhealthy people and guys that had, alcohol issues and all kinds of things. And it's because I was a mirror, and we attract what we are, and we're a mirror. So I stayed stuck in this comfort zone because food was predictable. I felt like I had control with food, even though I was completely out of control with it, because everything else in my life felt out of control. Um, but for me, where things really shifted and I had the wake up call was, I had a night where I'd finished a binge and I'd always thrown the food in the garbage, because I'm like, if I throw it in the garbage, I'm not going to stoop that low. I'm not going to go dig through the garbage and eat the food. And so the particular night where I dug through the garbage was a low point moment. I'd thrown the food out. I was laying on the couch in tears, bloated, in pain. At this point, I knew I was binge eating. and all the significant serious health issues it could cause, but I was just like, had no idea how to change it. And then about an hour after, I was like, well, I have a bit of room if this is the last time I'm going to do this, right? There's that all or nothing mentality coming in. And it's so important, side note, for us to work on overcoming that all or nothing mentality with food, body image, binge eating, all of that, because that is one of the most common massive triggers that keeps us stuck in the cycle. I help my clients with that all the time. So if you're in that all or nothing mentality, that is one of the things keeping you stuck. It's not about willpower. It's not about trying harder on your diet. It is about overcoming and healing things like the all or nothing mentality. And so I was laying on my couch in pain, in tears, my little apartment. And I was like, well, I might as well go grab the rest of the cookies if this is the last time I'm going to do this. So I went into my kitchen. I opened up my little garbage can cupboard, pulled out my little blue garbage can. I'll never forget. Grabbed the cookies, ate them. They were specifically Oreos. I'll never forget. And then I just sat on the floor and cried. And I just remember being in tears, and I said out loud, I was like, who am I? I just ate out of a garbage can. What's wrong with me? Like, God, why? How is this my life? Why is this happening? Why? Why is this so dark? Why am I going through this? I don't understand. Like, I had such a good upbringing, and like, why? I don't understand. And then I also had a second instance, which happened a couple nights later, where I binged again and I bought cupcakes from a local bakery. And this time I was like, no, I can't just throw these in the garbage inside because I know I'm going to dig through and eat them. So I went out into the back alley, threw them into the dumpster. And then an hour later, went back out and dug through the dumpster. And I was like, holy crap, that was next level. I've got a serious food addiction. I've got a serious sugar addiction. This I can no longer take lightly. I'm spending way too much money that I don't have. I'm very unhappy in every area of my life. I'm broke. I have a crappy retail job. I'm alone. I am, constantly in the red in my bank account. I am, not doing well with my job, working retail. I'm not fulfilled. I don't want to be alone forever. I want to find the love of my life. I want to be healthy. My health is declining significantly and very fast because I'm doing this and so destructive to my body. And I was like, I've got to figure this out. I can't keep doing this. I'm not willing for this to keep up. And like, what happened through these experiences, these low points, which I really don't want you to have to go through low point moments. Please don't let yourself wait until you have low point moments like that, or low point moments like you are in this behavior for long enough that it fuels you to end up with type 2 diabetes or cancer or heart issues and high blood pressure or something really significant. We don't want to tempt fate. We can prevent by catching it so that you don't have a low point moment or have to have a wake up call. I don't want that for you. So for some of you though, you will push it until the low point moment or the wake up call, but please don't. Please do something about it before those things happen. And so what happened is, I like to explain this because it helps you to understand. So I was tolerating suffering. I was in this comfort zone where I'm like, food's my friend. My issues aren't that big of a deal. I was in denial. It was a freaking huge deal, but I was in denial that it wasn't a big deal. My ego was convincing me it wasn't a big deal. Food's my friend. Like, it's fine. But it's like, no, it was a freaking huge deal. So many costs, financial costs, physical health costs. I'm bloated. I'm inflamed. I'm 70 pounds overweight. I'm addicted to food. I'm spending all my free time watching movies and binge eating, not seeing my friends. I'm not being social. I'm like 23 years old at the time, 22 years old, right? Time in my life are passing me by and I'm just asphyxiated with food, right? I hated my body. I was always so negative. I went through anxiety and depression, like when I was in the end of that relationship, because I hated my body and all these things happened. And it's just like a lot to go through between 19 to 24. So what happened with those two experiences is it crushed my denial that it wasn't a big deal. It crushed the comfort zone. The suffering became far bigger than my fears. It crushed my fears. The fear of the unknown, the fear of who I'd be if I didn't use food, the fear of what if I failed. All that got crushed. And what became so apparent in those moments was the significant level of suffering that I could no longer deny. I was like, this is a serious issue. I need to figure this out. I don't know how it's going to look. I don't know what the heck I'm going to do, but I got to figure it out because I'm not willing for this to be what kills me. I'm not willing for this to isolate me and hold me back from living an amazing life. So that needed to happen for me to wake me up and catapult me onto the journey of starting to heal. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew had to figure something out. I had no knowledge of anything that I do now. I knew nothing about food and nutrition and mindset and anything, right? So, one of the first things I did, and I mean this with the most respect. However, I've had so many of you reach out and share your poor experiences with me as well. But I know there's some amazing therapists and psychologists and all kinds of different things out there. So, kudos to all of you. You're doing the best you can. But I thought, well, maybe I should go and see somebody. I didn't really have the money, but I mustered up a few $100s and I went and saw a psychologist. And I poured my heart out to her. I felt so scary and vulnerable, but I shared with her what I was dealing with. And she looked up at me and said, well, just don't go to the store and buy the food. You need to learn how to love yourself. And in that moment, I felt so judged and criticized and not heard. And then I was like, well, have you been through any of this? She's like, well, no, but I have the education. And in my mind, I'm like, she just has no idea what I'm going through. She doesn't get it. And so that triggered me to binge. And I was like, you know what? I don't think I'm meant to get help. I think I'm meant to figure this out on my own. And so each of us is going to make the sovereign decision of if we decide to figure it out ourselves and or if we decide to invest in support. Here's my encouragement. If you've been struggling for years or decades trying to do it yourself, I really encourage you that it might be time to get some support, to invest in support. Because if you've been struggling for years or decades, there are things that you don't know, things that you don't understand, or your ego is in such strong, full-blown control that having that support, guidance, and accountability to help you along the way, to provide you with the tools and coaching and support, and to help you learn how to take your power back from your ego and break these old habits is probably exactly what you need. Right. But each of you is going to make the decision that feels best for you, whether you reach out to me or someone else, or you're chipping away on your own. It's completely up to you. But I really encourage you to reach out for support because you can accelerate your healing and actually overcome this by getting the aligned support with someone you feel safe and comfortable with. And ideally someone who's been through what you have to some level, because I think we can relate more. And I have the brain of an addict. I went through it. So I started the journey on my own, and I always say, envision being on the edge of the Amazon jungle with a butter knife, because that's what I felt like getting ready to try and find my way through to the other side. So I'll do other episodes where I break down each level of the journey, because it was a physical journey first, then it was an emotional and mental journey, and then it became an energetic and spiritual journey, and then I started my business. And then that healing my relationship with money. Holy crap, has that ever been a journey? It's a whole other conversation, but I'll just kind of summarize. So first, I started to learn about sugar. I'm like, I have to learn about sugar. Something has to be up with sugar. I'm always losing control. I crave it like crazy. What the heck? So I start to research about sugar, start reading and realizing that sugar is 10 times more addictive than cocaine. It is very addictive and designed that way on purpose. And that they put in everything to make you addicted, to numb your taste buds so that you need to have more to get the same dopamine high. And that when you eat a lot of sugar, MSG, aspartame, for some people, the casein in dairy, which is the protein, and the wheat or the gluten in the wheat also can excite the same excite the same part of the brain as a hard drug. And I was getting a heroin high from eating wheat and dairy, while I'd eat a piece of cheese and want to eat the whole block, and eat a piece of bread and want to eat the whole loaf. I was very addicted to food. I had a full-blown food addiction. Right. And to me, food addiction is where you're constantly obsessing about food. You're constantly losing control with it and trying to gain control. You're planning your next binge. You eat a little bit and you completely lose control. You can't just have little bits of sugar or bread or whatever. You're in a complete loss of control. It's you can't have it around you. It's like alcohol. If it's around you, it's too tempting, and then you're giving into it. I always say if I would have chose alcohol or something harder, I probably wouldn't have survived, because it was just such a deep, immense addiction. But I never had alcohol issues. I never really cared for it much. I drank enough in my, late teens and early 20s, but yeah, never really been a big fan of it. So it started to make me not feel crazy when I started to read about sugar and learn these things. It was mind blowing. And for some of you, sugar may not be the issue. It may be dairy, or it may be cheese, or maybe chips, or maybe fast food. Maybe you don't eat as much as I was. That's okay. I'm just general, like from my experience, but I know some of you aren't dealing with this as intensively. Some of you are, some of it is worse. But it made me not feel crazy when I started to learn that a lot of the foods have been designed on purpose to make us addicted so that we keep buying them and making these big food companies a lot of money. Frito-Lay, Heinz, Coca-Cola, Kraft, right? Like all these big junky, crappy food companies are very corrupt and do this on purpose. They literally add natural flavors into everything and manipulate and make them in a lab to make you addicted. They literally have people in lab coats that test to give you the perfect high. They want you addicted. And guess, of course, why? Because then when you're addicted and you're eating all this junk and you eventually have something happen to you, well, then you have to rely on big pharma. Right. And then it makes them a lot of money and they're in bed with each other. And so I started learning all this and I'm like, oh my gosh, why? Why are there human beings on this planet that want to profit off of making people sick and addicted and unwell? And I went through this period of anger and grief about like waking up to the corruption in the food industry and big pharma. And that was like 14 years ago, let alone everything else I've learned in the last 4 or 5 years. Right. Anyways, so it started to make me not feel crazy. I felt like it wasn't my fault anymore, which started to feel good, right? So I started to change the way that I was eating, trying more like gluten-free and dairy-free alternatives. Side note, people ask me this all the time. I don't make all my clients go gluten, dairy, and refined sugar-free. Some of my clients are very addicted to sugar, and so we talk about alternatives, and some of them go, I think I do need to try and cut out sugar to gain traction. It's up to each individual client. But then there's others that have no issue with it. And for them, it's like the gluten is the issue or the dairy is the issue. And some don't cut anything out. Or we bring in alternatives because they have high inflammation and a thyroid issue, and those conditions improve via less inflammatory things. But it's always up to each person. But I made the personal decision to fully cut out refined sugar, wheat, and dairy because every time I had bits of them, I would lose control again. And then I would be binge eating for weeks or months. And then it would be a slippery slope to try and gain traction. It took me dozens of attempts, but I finally was able to clear them out. But I swapped them for alternatives. However, I realized what an emotional journey all of this was when I still wanted to binge on 10 bananas and a jar of natural peanut butter, a brown rice, pasta, goat cheese, and steak bowl. I'd want to like eat the whole thing of pasta. I would go to the restaurant and get like a chicken curry with rice and then want to like binge my way through like 3 more orders of it. And so then I'm like, wow, I'm baking. Like I'd bake a batch of like gluten-free, dairy-free, refined sugar-free muffins and eat the whole thing. I'm like, okay, this isn't just about the food. There's something deeper here. So that's when I really started to go, okay, this is what I need to look at next level of the journey. I don't know what's triggering me. I need to figure out what my binge triggers are. I don't have healthy ways to cope with stress, so I need to start to figure out healthy ways to cope with my stress. I'm afraid to feel my feelings, so I've got to start to try and figure that out. I really dislike my body still. I feel insecure. I'm still tying my worth up with how much the number on the scale, and I'm still wanting to diet and like quick fix. So I started to write down my triggers. So each time I was triggered, of course, I'd get so pissed off and angry at myself. But then I'm like, okay, what happened? Let's look at it. And I started to accumulate my list of triggers. So the list of triggers I give my clients to this day is the very list that I created when I was struggling. But of course, I've added more to it through interactions with other people. And I put it in every room in my apartment to start to remind me. So before you go to the store to binge, check with your list first, right? To start to interrupt the pattern of just going to the store. And then I started to read self-help books and found Louise L. Hay's You Can Heal Your Life and started learning about how our emotions can get suppressed in the body and fuel physical symptoms and, self-love and mindset and, starting to meditate, learned about EFT tapping, breath work, journaling, yoga, baths, getting out into nature, and all these different things that actually would help calm me down and help prevent me to binge. So I started incorporating a self-care practice, which is very important for healing and for mental health and everything. And then I was like, okay, I'm still afraid to feel. So I was like, okay, I'm feeling fear right now. I'm going to just sit and put a timer on for 30 seconds and feel. And I did. And I was terrified at first. I thought the world was going to end. And then the 30 seconds went by and I'm like, oh my gosh, nothing bad happened. Everything's okay. I'm okay. I just felt, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of myself, right? So positive self-acknowledgement, seeing I could do it and nothing bad was going to happen because the ego wants to convince us that it's horrible, it's bad, something bad is going to happen if I actually stop and do this. Nothing bad is going to happen. So I started to build momentum. I started to catch my triggers. The binging was happening less because I was catching it, starting to use my self-care tools. And then when I binged again, I started to see it as a learning opportunity, showing me something else that was out of alignment that I hadn't yet worked on. So I gained massive traction to stop the binge eating for a while. And then I really started working on like the positive self-talk. I hated myself, but I was like, I've got to learn how to love myself through the repetition of affirmations, tapping, journaling, looking in the mirror and starting to say nice things to myself, things I'm grateful for about my body. And through a period of a couple of years of this repetition, trying to catch negative self-talk, I'd apologize to myself if I said something mean, right? If I get upset about my weight. Obviously, I had a lot of messy moments and teary moments and emotional moments and moments where I was so critical of my body. But over time, I learned how to like and then love myself. And, I thought everything was dealt with. And this was about a year before I started my business. And then I went into a final phase of binge eating where I was clear for a while, but it was probably about 6 months without binging. And then my mom declined a lot more and was falling a lot at home. And she was stuck at home on the floor for hours and she couldn't get back up. So dad would come home and find her on the floor. That was such a just absolutely such an experience of despair for me to find out that this was happening to her. And then I went home and found her on the floor once. And just such a, oh, just a down experience to come home to find your mom laying on the floor in tears. And obviously, because she'd been laying there for hours, she'd gone to the washroom and like all of that. Right. And so it's just like, holy crap, how do I even deal with this? Like most of my friends' moms are like thriving in this. And like my mom is literally like, cannot help herself or take care of herself at all. And so we had my dad and I decided it's important that we get mom into a home. She needs to be taken care of properly and we can't give her the quality of life and care that she need at home. And so while we were waiting for her to get into the home, that was just such a stressful experience. My dad went through depression. My mom was so upset. I'm the only child. I have no one to kind of like get support from because they're both processing and going through their own stuff. And so I felt very alone through that period of time. So I did go back to food after Christmas and went into binge eating for probably about 4 or 5 months. And the other thing that triggered me to go back into binge eating was my very lovely soulmate love of my life and I had reconnected at that time and we were talking and we started hanging out and we had spent New Year's together. And at the party, he kept telling me he loved me. And he'd just look at me and he's like, I love you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, don't say this if you don't want to be with me. Like, it's really confusing if you're saying this and you don't want to be with me. This was like in 2012. So it was like 12 years ago. And so then, like, a couple days later, when, after that had happened, because obviously there's drinking involved and stuff through that, I was like, remember when you said you loved me? And he's like, as a friend, he's like, I'm not ready, blah, blah, blah. And that just upset me so much. And then we got into a big fight. And I'm like, I don't want to have anything to do with you because I want something more. You don't. This is really unhealthy for me. And those two experiences really triggered me into deep binge eating again for a final time where I really had to learn healthy boundaries. I had to learn to detach from my mother's fate and that I could not control what was going to happen to her and that I could give her love and help and do what I could, but that I had to stop letting her experience pull me into such a depth of despair, grief, and sadness all the time because it would take weeks to shift and I would like cry all the way home from going to visit and then I'd want to binge and all this stuff. So I really had to like build a foundation and a thicker skin and learn detachment, letting people be on their path, but not letting it have such a significant impact on me. And so as I was healing all this and making all these changes, people like, your energy is different. You're different. You're doing different things. Like they're asking questions. And at this time, I'm already going into nutrition, like holistic nutrition school, learning so much. And then I'm like, I really want to start my own business. I want to help other women who are dealing with this. And I had to go through that final phase of binge eating because it really helped me with detachment and the boundary setting and say no when it was a no and learning when I didn't have capacity to hold space to others and that was okay. And that I couldn't save my parents. Like it wasn't my responsibility and that there's just certain things that I had to detach from. Boundaries are so important. I learned I was a sensitive empath and I was feeling a lot and I had to learn how to deal with that. And so all of this really helped me build the foundation and equip myself with the things that I now equip and support and help all my clients through. And then the business was birthed. in 2013, August of 2013, right after we had the most historic flood in the history of our province, right? So odds are stacked against you starting a business, and everyone's like, I don't know, is it a good time? Blah, blah, blah. But all I had in my mind and my body was this inspiration and this motivation and desire to start a business, to get going, to get my name out there and start helping as many women as I could to overcome this self-sabotage with food, the body image issues, and so much more. Um, and that's where it all started. And that's the journey in the story. And like I said, I'm going to break down the phases more. Um, but I just wanted to share that again because I know there's not a lot of new listeners. And even if you've been listening for a while from the beginning, you're going to learn different things. It's a good check-in for you and your reality of, is it time to set more boundaries? Are you the sensitive empath? And working on that now is important. Maybe you've been listening from the very beginning, but you've been hesitant to reach out for help and nothing's changing for you. And now you're like, you know what? I think it's finally time to do something about this. So this is what brought me to birth this business and be 10 and a half years later of having helped thousands of women, creating hundreds of podcast episodes and so much more. And it's such a blessing. And now I know why that night when I was sitting on my kitchen floor going, why is this happening to me? Why? Well, oftentimes when we're going to be of service with something, we have to go through it ourselves and heal it and overcome it so that we know how to help others and what to do to help others and to have the empathy and compassion and understanding for what that person is going through. And to also know if I could go through it and heal it, you, each single one of you that is listening, regardless of your struggles with your health, your mindset, your relationship with food and body, you can heal it. You can overcome it. You are so powerful. You do not realize how powerful you are. And I'm here to remind you of that. I had a client session a few days ago and she's just so lovely and we're just kind of getting started. And I afterward kind of got off the session and I was thinking about her and like her struggles with binging and purging and all the things she was talking about hating her body and stuff. And it just brought me back to the 15 years ago with what I was struggling with. And I just had a really emotional moment and I was like, oh my gosh, like we don't realize how powerful we are. We get so hard on ourselves and so critical. And one of the whole points of me doing this podcast, doing one-on-one coaching, doing group program, whatever it is, but to be of service is to help you reconnect to your power, your love, your self-worth, your confidence, this beautiful intuitive connection you get to have with your body to help you identify the roots of your issues. All of this knowledge and wisdom was within you. This knowing is within you, but we've been so conditioned in the mind that we're just these little pieces of crap on this planet that don't matter. That is not true at all. You are amazing. You're all amazing. You all are full of potential and so much amazingness and power and love. So I am here to help remind you you're not alone. Try not to feel so ashamed and embarrassed for whatever you're going through. You are powerful. You are amazing. You are so full of love and potential. We just have to remind you, we have to reconnect that knowing, which is why I'm here to help you do just that. Okay. You're not alone. So if you're listening to this and you're going, oh my goodness, I had no idea, or wow, I don't feel alone. This sounds like me to some level or fully. It's like, oh my gosh, I feel like you're like talking to me in my room right now while I'm listening to this. Well, here's my invitation to you. Welcome, first of all. Keep listening to the podcast. It is full of golden nuggets to help you on your journey to food and body freedom. If you're not sure if you're struggling with emotional or binge eating, you can go to amberapproved.ca and take the free quiz. You're going to get some podcasts and resources to help assist you on those first steps. If you know you're struggling with emotional eating, binge eating, food addiction, binging and purging, the weight body battle, the diet, yo-yo quick fix back into emotional eating, right? You're bloated all the time. You're exhausted. You suspect your hormones are out of whack. You're tired of fighting with your body and being so negative and knowing it's having a negative impact on your quality of life. Then this is where it's up to you. If you want to reach out, which I encourage, to have a conversation around support to gain this food and body freedom and fully overcome these things that I've been talking about, then I invite you to book a 30-minute body freedom consultation. It's $50 USD. You fill out an intake form and you book your time. You sign up for a program. That $50 fee is subtracted off of your investment. You can also email me at info@amberapproved.ca if you have questions about programs, what may be the best fit for you. I'm so happy to connect with you and explore that as well. There's also the group program, which is 8 weeks, which is a great intro into everything. So if you're wanting to come and join us for that, it's 50% off for the first 5 spots. We start mid-February. We're going to be connecting weekly for 8 weeks for 60-minute sessions, tools, worksheets, all kinds of things will be included. So if you want any details or you have questions or you want to secure a spot for that, info@amberproof.ca, subject line group program. And for anyone who signs up by January 31st, you will also get free access to my 3-part gut health masterclass coming mid-February. And if you're wanting to just start with something small and you're struggling with gut issues, come and join us for the 3-part Glorious Gut Health Masterclass. It's $55 USD, and that's early bird, $33 off. The enrollment link for all of these will be in the show notes at amberproof.ca/podcast/460. If you have no idea where to start, this is where I would just encourage you to book a consultation or email me so that we can just explore, what your struggles are, what your goals are, what you're wanting support with, and what might be the best fit. One of the things about having my business now for 10 and a half years is I've created all kinds of different levels of support at different price points, depending on your budget. And we can also talk about creating a custom package for you, depending on what you want in it. But sometimes investing in our health or a business or making an investment is one of the best things we can do. I can tell you, when I started this business, I had no idea what I was doing. I wasn't making any money in my first year and a half. And it's like, if I didn't start making a shift soon, I wouldn't have had a business to continue on to help you all. And I have to tell you, one of the best investments I ever made was in a business coach about a year and a half into my business, which helped catapult me into creating the systems and structures to help more people and get people the results that they wanted. And it was the best investment I ever made. And I will tell you, I did not have the money at the time to invest in this coach. I made the personal decision to put it on a credit card, but it was the best investment I ever made because I made it back 4 weeks later, and was able to then expand my business and start creating more things and doing things to help more people. So I'm not saying you have to go and put it on a credit card, but I'm just saying, don't shut down to the possibility of investing in yourself. I've had clients have parents help them, sisters, brothers, cousins, friends, family members. Some people go, you know what? My health is a very important investment. I will put it on my card and I'll pay it off in chunks. So, but again, you don't have to do that. It's whatever feels right for you. But it's like, what is it costing you to stay stuck financially, physically, emotionally, etc.? And what if you did take a step into an investment, or even something small that's like $50 and it really helped you along on your journey, right? But the podcast is here as a great start. There's hundreds of episodes. It's a great free resource, but I just wanted to remind you that sometimes we do want to take a bit of a step out of our comfort zone when we're investing, and it can really change our lives in a positive way. And I know what that's all about. And I respect everyone has stuff with money and certain money fears and perceptions. Trust me, I've had my fair share. But it's through, healing and working through things that I've also been able to overcome that as well, right? So you never know. I've had clients make more money, get raises, start and grow businesses because they've invested and done this deeper healing. So I often find when we do heal, with food and body freedom, we often end up more abundant in our bank account anyway. So food for thought. Thank you so much for being with me for today's episode. It's just been an absolute pleasure to share all of this with you. Like I said, if you have questions about anything or you have an idea for a future episode, you can reach out an email or DM me, and I'm happy to take it into account. So as I always say, I'm cheering you on. I'm sending you so much love. Remember, there is no better time than the present to take action on your health, your well-being, and your journey to food and body freedom. So for those of you that are going to reach out, I'm so excited to connect with you. The door is totally open and I welcome you in. And I'm just so grateful for all of you that are here listening. And I'm really excited for a whole new episode again next Sunday. So we'll chat with you then. See you later. Take care. Sending lots of love.